Get down here, Merc.
The demo for Final Fantasy VII Remake just got released, and I wanted to talk about my concerns for the game. It only covers up to the first Mako reactor, paralleling the original demo disc, although in this case it's about 4 times longer. My issues stem mostly from the plot details revealed in the demo, and how it will affect the pacing of the story compared to the original. However, I feel it's necessary to look at some of the things I noticed about the game itself first, outside of the original. Combat is a tad boring. There's one combo, no jump button, and the ATB system doesn't add much excitement either. While I can believe that Square Enix wanted to make an action game that appealed to as many people as possible, it's still baffling that they decided to keep it so gut-wrenchingly simple. I don't see it getting more complicated than in this demo, unless there are combo modifiers or moves that affect how the player uses basic attacks. This is exacerbated by the UI. It doesn't show important information clearly enough. Basic attacks are so weak that it's clear the game encourages the use of commands given to the player, as they are the only moves that do decent damage. Yet I see many people struggling to notice that the ATB gauge is filled completely while they try focusing on the fight. If there was a voice line where Cloud said something like, "I'm ready," whenever a bar filled, it would become a lot clearer. Your partners could have similar lines as well. But if that's too annoying, then simply changing the UI to show the ATB bar more prominently would have the same effect. The problem isn't that it's not there, it's that in a sea of information the most important bits are difficult to notice. I also had some issues with the camera. It seems too zoomed in, even when setting it further away. I tried booting up classic mode to see how it would play. Turns out it's a joke. It plays less like the original and more like Final Fantasy XIII. You know, everyone's favorite.
This game fucks you in the ass for free. Well, actually, it fucks you in the ass for 60 goddamn dollars.
You know, last time we played Final Fantasy XIII, Michael died.
The game's playing itself, John. The game's playing itself, John. The game's just playing itself, John. The game just died.
Just check out these overhead maps, guys.
He died, Gerard. I don't really see why you would take this risk. That's fine. No, I'm gonna go get a soda and a body bag. You have fun.
Special mention goes to the boss of the demo. It has attacks that are difficult to read, and everyone I've watched play this demo struggled with his shenanigans on their first playthrough. I also wanted to add that the demo is extremely railroaded, even taking out the small bits of choice from the original game. It's also clear to me that dodge rules need to be fixed to actually feel useful, because right now it only seems to cause more issues than it solves. With that all covered, it's now time to look into what exactly bothers me the most about this demo: the changes to the introduction of Final Fantasy VII. I guess we can start with some good changes. Materia is now a cosmetic change, making the world feel more real, and gives the player a sense that what they do in the menu does affect the world in real ways. I enjoyed some of the character interactions between the members of Avalanche when they talk to one another. The little dialogue they have while Cloud can still walk around reminds me of Chrono Trigger, which is never a bad thing. Also, there's also... Jesse's cute, I guess. Well, that was a short list. Let's get talking about the dumb changes in the game. The first thing any new player will notice is the constant tutorials during the game. I know this is the beginning of the game and a demo, but the extreme amount of hand-holding is crazy to me. Not only are the tutorial prompts distracting and take me out of the game, but there's also no option to turn them off, which is in addition to the constant chattering between Cloud and Barrett giving advice to new players. I know, with this being the introduction of the game, obviously it's going to have a tutorial or two, as well as a piece of dialogue that tells the player the weakness of the enemy for free. But still, I feel like that's fine as long as it doesn't stop me in my tracks. Moving on, after the first fight you'll soon notice that instead of Bolt and Ice, Cloud instead has only Fire materia. While not essential, this may cause issues for the boss fight later on. After dispatching a few guards, Cloud meets up with the rest of Avalanche. Voice acting is always a touchy subject, so I'll just say no one was super distracting. Except for Matt Jones, who voices Wedge, although he may just be distracting because of my personal experience with that actor.
Spock has total Vulcan control over his digestion.
As the introduction chugs along, it's become clear that outside of recreating iconic shots, Square Enix has no intent to flesh out the padding that they stuffed in to make sure the intro is an hour long on a first playthrough. In fact, I guess I'll talk about that now. The entire intro has been stretched out for the sake of game time. This is likely due to the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake will only be covering the first disc of the original Final Fantasy VII, which means that certain scenes will need to be expanded on, either through cutscenes or longer fights. This is an issue as the characters still need to grow at the same pace as before. The simple lines of dialogue that inform the player of a character's motivations are still present, but now with 2 extra scenes added of that character espousing the same thing. This is extremely clear with Cloud and Barret. The scenes with them seem to reinforce the same 2 ideas about each character. Cloud is not interested in the morals of Avalanche, and instead wants a simple paycheck, and Barret believes wholeheartedly that Shinra is causing the decline of the planet, and that it's his duty to save it. This causes an issue where aspects of characterization that seemed subtle in the original seem blatant here. While it would have been great to get scenes that expand on Cloud and Barret's personal philosophies, I do not like being reminded about those traits in inefficient scenes that could be used for world building. Oh, right. Cloud's amnesia and Mako poisoning are set up extremely clearly, and quite early. It triggers about 3 times in the span of the 1 hour introduction. There's even a black wing shown, which I'll discuss in a moment. I replayed the original introduction to see if there was any similar setup. The only thing I got was a voice saying, "Watch out, this isn't a reactor," which could be any number of things. But Cloud clearly having headaches or spacing on his age and getting the fuzzies whenever Tifa gets mentioned is a clear case of misaligned memory. I'm afraid that for the hundreds of people playing this game for the first time, when it's eventually revealed that Cloud has memory problems, it'll be less of a shock and more like, well, yeah, of course he does. Moving right along, once Barret joins the party, you're given access to Thunder and his gun arm for long-range attacks. The player can switch between party members on the fly, but the player-controlled character will always gain more in their ATB gauge than the non-controlled party member. This indicates that the game wants to incentivize playing Barret in the final fight, but I assume that the ability to re-equip material will be unlocked in the main game, so it likely won't be that way upon release. The introduction continues, and the player gets more inefficient scenes explaining the same character aspects that the original got across in a few simple model movements and 1 conversation. Once the player gets closer to the reactor core, they're given a few new enemies to play with that aren't too much trouble before landing in a clear boss room. The advantage of the JRPG system is that boss rooms are less noticeable because there doesn't need to be physical space for them. This means that bosses are usually denoted with save points and story clues. Here in an action combat game, the arena needs to be large and inclusive for the boss, so it becomes blatantly obvious that there's a boss near the bottom of the reactor due to the large space and lack of enemy spawns. In any case, it's time to fight a boss. In the original, the fight is quick, but does test the player's knowledge of the combat system so far, and gives Materia a moment to shine as a great way to take down the boss quickly. The remake gives us this bloated boss fight that has 3 phases and becomes a chore halfway through. Honestly, if there were only the first and third phase, I wouldn't necessarily be frustrated with it, but the second phase completely rubs me the wrong way. The player is forced to attack the back of the enemy, which teaches the player that some enemies may only be damaged in some areas, which is great, but making the boss slam shockwaves at the player and throw missiles and climb the wall all the time while trying to hit that specific point is an exercise in frustration. I will also re-emphasize that guarding and dodge rolling the missiles don't feel quite effective enough. The unlag on rolling especially frustrates me. In any case, the party defeats the machine and the player's requested time is then allotted to escape. I don't know how anyone would need 30 minutes. I did it in less than 10, but whatever. Another change is Jessie's role in the escape. Cloud is now forced to save her, and there's 2 or 3 cutscenes dedicated to it before she goes ahead at the behest of Barret. This is clearly a case of more padding and a way that they make player choice less of a factor while playing the game. Finding their way out, Avalanche safely gets away as the core explodes. Cloud jumps good, which gets Jessie's approval, and ends the demo. What I learned about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that it will pad out a lot of scenes and moments due to a lack of content from the original. It also looks like Sephiroth will appear physically before the end of Midgar, which may or may not ruin the pacing of his reveal in the original game. It also seems that some story beats later on in the game are established more concretely here, likely to keep those moments in people's minds while they wait to play the other 2 parts. I was hoping that this demo would alleviate my concerns, but Square Enix continues to revise the history of their old games. It seems crazy to me that they can make so many changes to a product and then call it the same game. If this game was sold as a retelling or as a supplement to the original, then I would only have issues inherent to the gameplay, as I initially discussed. But instead, this is likely going to be advertised as the definitive way to play Final Fantasy VII, which only serves to confuse the conversation as well as undermine the work of the original creators. I'm also frustrated at the way that this is being handled as 3 distinct games being released over time, each one covering a disc from Final Fantasy VII. It seems extremely greedy. Hopefully Square lightens the blow for consumers who want all 3. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most successful Japanese role-playing games ever released, mostly due to excessive advertising. This remake has, seemingly, no purpose in existing. Squaresoft told Cloud's story 20 years ago, continuing to expand on it in films and games released later. It's an important piece of gaming history that's extremely available, so I can only see 2 types of people playing this game: Square Enix fanboys who love Final Fantasy VII, or those who wish to experience the story of Final Fantasy VII, but without things like turn-based combat and random battles getting them down. Hopefully it does well for Square Enix Japan because they really need a win right now. But as I'm seeing it, I'm unsure if this Final Fantasy VII trilogy will make its money back.